Welcome to the second episode of Fit Life Journeys. This is a podcast where we discuss the truth about living a fit and healthy lifestyle, break down myths, and share the stories of some real people, with the hopes that we can inspire and educate others about what really goes on in a healthy lifestyle, help get some people out of that diet culture, which they think might be healthy but really isn't, and empower people to take action in their own life. So I'm Shauna Kirk, and joining me today is one of those real people that we're talking to, Hanna S. She's been a member of Fit Life Gym here for almost 5 years. So we've got some good things to talk about with Hanna. It might not seem like a normal fitness journey as we get started because we're going to talk about some pretty serious stuff today. We're going to go through things like grief, loss, and anxiety. But Hanna's also going to share how fitness has helped her deal and heal with those things. And I think it's going to be really beneficial to a lot of people because sometimes they try to fix or heal one part of their life, like maybe their body or something physical, without taking care of the emotional side of things. And they really struggle because those two things need to go hand in hand. So today, Hanna and I are going to talk. I know one thing I really want to stress on this podcast is there's so many different kind of results you get at the gym. So she's going to be kind enough today to share some of her personal results and offer hope for others that might be on a similar journey. So Hanna, hi.
Hello.
Welcome to episode 2 of our Fit Life Journeys podcast.
I know, it's episode 2, which is kind of wild.
And thank you for joining. You thought that I was going to crash and burn on episode 1?
No, it's just exciting that we're doing this. Like, it's real. We've been talking about it for months.
I know. I'm excited about it. Episode 1 went pretty well. MJ was a pretty good talker.
Agreed. Yeah.
No pressure.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's a tough act to follow, so we'll see how I can heal and deal here on live.
Heal and deal
podcast.
Here. It's live to tape. We can stop whenever you need to.
I know.
But if I make you cry, that's going to have to stay.
There might have to be tissues today.
Oh, I don't have tissues today.
We'll have to run and grab them.
Okay. There should be some right
I see
behind
them.
me.
I have them eyed in my vision.
Perfect. So who wants to see Hanna cry today? Or hear Hanna cry if you're listening to this?
I don't like crying. I'm going to be honest. It's my least favorite part of healing, but
so how much of your debate skills are going to come in handy today?
Impromptu thinking and answering questions is a lot of it. So if any of my students watch this by any chance, no, you didn't.
Oh yeah, the first one, like I'm in the middle of it and I'm just like, Mom, don't, and I'm like, no, I'm not showing this to anyone.
Yeah.
none of my family members need to see this because I'm talking bad about them.
No, you weren't talking bad. You're telling your honest truth, and that's important.
And my honest truth is there are certain things my family members did that were annoying.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've all got childhood trauma. It's fine. We're working on it. We're getting through it.
Right. And I think one thing that's important is to know that you've probably annoyed your family members too.
Correct. Yes. We all have some tendencies that probably really bother our family.
And you live with your sister, so I'm sure you're very familiar with that.
And if she's watching this, Emma, I love you, and don't worry about anything. It'll be fine.
Same, Emma. Same. Okay. So I want to start from the beginning. So circling back to 5 years ago when you joined here.
Circa 2017.
Can't believe it's been 5 years.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Wild. It's going to be 5 years in May, which feels like a bigger deal than it probably is to you guys, but I'm excited.
I know. I mean, it's crazy to have been around long enough for people who weren't here at the very beginning to be hitting 5 year milestones. Like, that's crazy to me. But anyway, my business partner, Josh, who is the owner here along with me and is our main trainer, he runs our orientation programs. And he has now, for at least 4 years, included your review from when you started.
Yeah.
And it says, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of long.
You can find it on Facebook.
You're wordy.
I do.
You can find it on Facebook if you want to scroll back to 2017 reviews. It says, most gyms intimidate the crap out of me. I never felt like I belonged next to all the macho fitness lovers. At Fit Life Gym, I always feel like I'm welcome. Whether it's the constant high fives during workouts, we had to scrap those for a minute during COVID. They're back a little bit. If you want a high five, the coach will give it to you. If you don't, they won't. Right now, yeah. Motivational yelling during tough sets from the coaches or the warm and fuzzies at the end of workouts. This place is more than just a gym. It's a way of life, and that never something I thought I'd say about fitness. So I think the reason that he shares this with people is probably the phrase warm and fuzzies.
Yeah, obviously. That's important.
So I know it was important for you guys to come and get warm and fuzzies because of some things that had gone on in your life previously. And this is a sensitive topic, so I'm going to let you share what had gone on in your life that was part of the reason why you came here.
Yeah. Well, 2017 was a terrible year, just in general. I think of that year and oftentimes wish that it was on fire. Regardless, we had just lost my mother in the early half of the 2017 year. So my sister and I obviously had to deal with a lot of coming to terms with what life was going to be like without her. And my sister knew another member here who suggested, hey, come check out this gym. Come, do this, be active. And my sister and I took a chance, and we've been here ever since. And the warm and fuzzies, to your point, was nice because it was a reminder that like what you're doing matters, and it's okay if it's hard, and it's okay if it's tough, and showing up is what's needed in the moment that we were in. So it was a really important piece of kind of coming back to terms with building a community after several years of having to take care of another human being. So it was definitely a welcome opportunity to be around other people that made you feel supported and made you feel uplifted in times where we didn't really feel so great internally.
Were you looking for that when you came here, or did you come here because, and you said you had a friend working out here, were you just thinking fitness at first and then discovered the other benefits, or were you thinking I need something for my mental health as well?
Yeah. Great question. Definitely for me, at least, I can't speak for my sister. It was fitness. It was, all of college, I worked out very consistently. I walked a ton. I mean, that's always what they say. Like in college, you're walking a ton, so you don't really have to worry too much about the actual like fitness part of it. But for me, it was, we had spent a year not really doing that. And I was feeling sluggish and slow and not as in shape as I wanted to be. So for me, it was fitness. I happily found that there were other, benefits and pros to being on the blue floor.
And that's one thing that's tough because we see members cycle through the caregiver thing, and it's really hard to take care of yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes, honestly, you have to make sacrifices. And for us, it was not being able to take care of that health and fitness the way that we had wanted to. Wouldn't have traded it for anything. That was time that was well spent. But it was definitely hard mentally and physically on my body. So this was an adjustment getting back into it. I remember the first couple sessions, I thought, man, I can't do this. Like, this is too hard. But here we are 5 years later. So it was possible to push through it.
So can you do it then?
Oh, heck yeah. I don't believe I can sometimes. If you ask Josh in Power Hour, he'll tell you that I constantly am in my head about weights, but for the most part, I can do it.
And I think this is something that will go into your whole journey is you and I have also often talked about, you're like, I don't know if I can do this weight, or I get scared that I'm going to hurt myself. I know the other thing that you are going to talk about at some point here is anxiety, and it's like, how much is that like
impacting?
Yeah.
A lot. I know a lot of people, I kind of find this wild. Some people don't have an internal monologue. I would like to meet someone that doesn't, because I don't know how that's possible.
I don't know what's happening in your head.
Right.
Are there pictures? Is there just nothing?
Is it just like caveman fire stick figures? Like, I don't understand. Yeah, I don't either. But a lot of anxiety for me is that I'm like constantly questioning if I'm okay where I am, and it's safety, right? Like that's like a basic lizard brain concept of, are you safe? And I think mine's always in hyperdrive. So when we're lifting weights, I'm like constantly like, oh my God, like, am I going to injure myself? Am I going to make this worse? Because I don't want to ever be in a position where I make something worse and then can't show up on the blue floor. Because I like the space. It's kind of like religion for me. Like it's a very great hour of just not having to deal with the mental thoughts and gymnastics going on in my brain. So it definitely has impacted, but I would say that through coaching and of course like a holistic approach of going to seek counselors, I've been able to manage it pretty well. And I would say partially because of the gym and the coaches. Yeah.
So just to kind of build a point of reference, did you have like anxiety issues before your mom? Or did it okay.
Yeah, no, I've had a generalized anxiety disorder since I was probably 15. I joke, and my therapist would laugh at this, but I always joke that it was because of timed math tests. So that was like the earliest memory of feeling anxious is timed math tests in grade school. But for the most part, it's always been a constant pattern. I would say in the last 3 years, though, it's been significantly managed better through exercise and through therapy. So we're on the up and up.
Did you start therapy early, or was that something that was recent in the last few years too?
I've been an on again, off again therapy goer. I went in high school a ton. Okay. So much to the dismay of my family, I like to talk things out because I've been in a room where I've been told to talk things out a lot. But recently, in the last 2 years, have found a really good treatment and therapist. And that's been, I think, a lot of the momentum that I've had is thanks in part to her. And then, like I said, exercise of getting that time to not be in my head.
Yeah. Which is, it's funny actually that you said that, because there's one thing, I do want to have some kind of general grief conversation with you.
Yeah.
We talked about, recently here at the gym, one of our members did a grief workshop. And one of the things I thought was interesting was she specifically mentioned, like, the idea of, like, avoiding or not talking about things is, like, kind of being a negative. So when you mentioned, like, this helps you get out of your head, I was almost like, wait, is this healthy?
Am I avoiding it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you avoiding? Is this a healthy coping mechanism? So that was one of the first things that was curious to me.
Yeah. And that was a great workshop. If anyone hasn't had a chance to watch it, I would 10 out of 10 recommend it. It was interesting for me to have and hear some of the myths that are associated with grief. But for that component, it's a tough question. I would say no. For me, it actually helps because of that anxiety, because of the constant war that's going on inside of me mentally. Having, I think I mentioned to you in passing too, like having an hour where all I'm thinking about is focusing on my breathing and focusing on whatever Josh or the coaches are telling me to do, that redirects that nervousness that I don't like. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do me any good. Whereas this is doing me good because it's getting me active. It's getting me moving, which is really helpful for me.
And it's not like you're shutting down completely forever. You have other places where you have outlets and you do talk about it and work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I almost wore my positive vibe shirt.
Really?
But see, it doesn't. It was very specific. I would never wear this. I would never wear this shirt if it had the word "only" on it.
Yeah.
It just has good vibes. It does not say "only."
Only, yeah.
Because this is one of the big things, and that's so these myths of grief, right? Don't feel bad. Positive vibes only. And that's something I think, especially with like younger people. Oh, don't cry, or like you don't have to feel bad. It's like no, let her feel bad.
Yeah.
This is something you should feel bad about. Go ahead and feel bad.
Stick with it. Yeah, no, and I think that's a societal thing, right? Like we've got a lot of people that would rather just pretend like things are okay and that's easier. And, hey, to each their own, everyone copes differently. But I'm of the belief that putting words, I guess, to the conversation is better and beneficial because it at least gets rid of that anxiousness and anxiety for me.
Yeah. Are your grief and anxiety like very much intertwined, or?
They weren't until 2017. That damn year. Sorry. Darn year.
Damn's fine.
Okay. We weren't sure. No, I would say that definitely, unfortunately, married those two thoughts, I would say, in that year. And that makes it, I think, harder too, because there's two things you're fighting instead of one, right? Like if it was one problem, it would be probably much easier, but I'm kind of like a little smorgasbord of different technical terms in therapy. It's fine.
Smorgasbord. No, but that's actually something I've been studying lately is like emotional stress. And they talk about like we see things in terms of good and bad, and that's not necessarily how they are. Like it has to do with like appropriateness and if they're adaptive or maladaptive. So like even happiness could be a maladaptive emotion if it's in the wrong situation. If your sister broke her leg and you were standing there laughing at her,
right?
That would be a maladaptive good emotion,
right?
As opposed to like anxiety. Like, I mean, obviously the whole basis of anxiety is protection.
Yes.
The problem is anxiety is our brains trying to protect us from things that aren't real threats.
Correct. Yeah. It's your lizard brain limbic system trying to go into freeze, fight, flight. And
yes,
my default is freeze. So
same.
Yeah. Right. It's hard. And I'm sure, as an owner of a gym, there's probably way more anxiety that you feel on a daily basis, especially now coming 2 years out of COVID.
Oh yeah. Everything. COVID was wild because we didn't know what to do. I mean, there was no book. There was no book. Yeah. When we started this gym, we had, at the time we had a franchise behind us. We had business coaches. We had all of this, like, here's your paperwork. Here's this. Here's this. All of a sudden, COVID hits. There's no paperwork. They put together, some people put some together as fast as they could. But, like, we had to figure out our own steps and
yeah.
make decisions. And some of them were tough decisions.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it ended up being very beneficial for me because I'm always the person who's like, well, give me the rule book and I'll follow it.
Right.
So to not have that rule book was like terrifying.
Pushing you out of your comfort zone.
But also it was like, I have to do this, whether or not it's terrifying. And like I've talked about this before, what I really ended up doing was like, is this a decision that I'm going to be able to sleep with tonight?
Yeah.
If I'm making a decision, I'm going to stay up all night worrying about if it was the right one. I'm going to find a different way. I'm going to find a different path. So that was, in COVID, it was like, make a decision, because you're not pleasing anyone. You can't please everyone.
Right.
So people want stuff, people don't want stuff. It's like, what's actually fair? What's going to make me feel like I did the right or the fair thing and I can sleep at night? So that was how...
that's a lot of pressure. And to the point of the grief workshop, that's also a loss. And you had to grieve, that throughout also being in charge of everything. So how hard was that?
And that's one thing that I think people don't give enough credit to COVID for how it has changed their lives internally. And I'm guessing you probably had to step up on some people for this just because of your like experiences with grief and having more of an understanding of like, okay, like I know how to handle loss. I know how to allow myself, give myself grace and allow myself room to move through this new emotion in this new situation.
It was hard. It was triggering because we were for a year pretty bound to our house, again, for good reason. But so then to go into the pandemic and kind of have that happen again, it was a little jarring, I'll be honest. Oh. And I know Emma and I did our best to do virtual boot camps, but it wasn't the same, right? It wasn't the same as being on the blue floor. And we were so grateful that we had the outlet still. Like everything that the gym did to help support us during that was a really great coping mechanism that I don't think gets enough credit. Like y'all stood in your place for us. And I can't thank everyone enough for still doing it. And now that we're back on the blue floor, it feels even more like I want to cherish it even more because we're back and we can do these things live and in person. So thank you. In other words, thank you for all that you do.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank Josh, because he was the one. There was a point during the pandemic where they were like, you should not leave your house. You should not go to a business. And we were like, is Josh it's two people in a room. Are they allowed to come here and still do workouts for these virtuals? And I was like, you might have to start doing these from home. And he goes, I'm going to the gym and I'm giving these people what they need until the cops literally physically come and escort me out. I'm like, okay. He also has a lot more balls than I do sometimes.
And you need that. And I mean, I would think in a business relationship, you need someone that's going to be willing to take those larger risks. But he was grieving too. Yes. I mean, that's
tough. And he painted.
I love that. It's a great outlet, right? Movement is a huge outlet. So
he painted and it was like, oh, we're not going to have people in here. Let's do some
renovation.
So that was one way that he did something.
To get through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard and everyone needs an outlet, to your point. But I think back to the myths that we were talking about earlier, it's really hard to stay positive in those moments.
Yeah.
And so for somebody, when you're going through either whatever grief it is, whether it's as, dark as whatever you want it to be, for someone to look at you and say, well, just stay positive. It's the biggest insult, I think. It's like, cool, I wish I could try that. Like, you've solved everything. Let me cancel therapy. Let me cancel anything else that I have supporting me. You're right. Like, why didn't I think of that? And that's just not how it works. Like, that's, hard part of dealing with something and getting in the weeds with it.
And so that's really funny because actually my current therapist, I think, is my 5th therapist. And the reason I like her was because she didn't just go, have you tried deep breathing?
Yeah. Right? Like, oh, meditation. Try meditation. Like, what
breathe.
Do you
mean? You'll be less anxious if you just breathe deep. And I'm like, oh.
Like, that's not how it works.
But so what's funny, I told you I'm studying this stuff right now. And one of the things in there, and I'm not going to dig it up to get the specifics, but it talked about how deep breathing actually helps with anxiety. And it told you what it does inside of your body.
The nervous system.
And I was like, if any of my therapists would have actually told me this, I might have believed it because they'd be like, breathe. And I'm like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
But if somebody, and this is just me, not everybody's
You like
the same
to know
way.
the why.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like to know the why. If somebody had said, oh, it's going to have this reaction inside of your nervous system and that's going to lead to this, I would have been all about it.
Correct. Yeah. That's the interesting part too, right? Like, I think that we're a unique set of people because we're similar in the sense that
we're
we
unique, all right.
Well, yes, but we like to understand like the why behind things, and that is how it helps us either cope or get through things.
And that is why you were such a good candidate for Power Hour.
Yes.
Now, for those of you who aren't members at Fit Life Gym may not know what this is. Power Hour is our small group strength training program. So it's more similar to personal training, but it's a small group environment. So it's slower paced. You get more individual attention because Hannah wants to do well. Yes. She wants to lift heavy. She wants to get results. She wants these things.
And Shauna was secretly just annoyed that I asked her a million questions after every session. If I had like, oh, why did this do that? And she'd be like, you know what? You just need to do Power Hour. And that was fair.
And I was right.
Yes. Now I love it.
Because, and it's like in a group, you can still get a great workout. You can still lift heavier.
And the coaches are very attentive.
But you do have to make more decisions for yourself.
Yes.
So when you get in that other environment, if you are not sure, should I do this weight? Is this going to be okay? It's slower, so you have someone to ask. Probably Josh always tells you to use the heavier weight. I don't know.
Well, it depends. It depends on, I think that's the nice part is he definitely this week for sure like pushed us all to go up in weight. But he will listen, and if you're worried or concerned, he'll work with you. He'll spot you. He'll make sure that you're not putting yourself in danger, and that's the biggest thing for anxiety, right? You want to feel safe, and for me, the slower pace and having an individual like more one-on-one with a coach is perfect. It's what I need because otherwise, I would just probably still be picking up 8-pound weights in boot camp when I could be picking up heavier weights.
Right. And the thing with lifting is, you have to constantly increase the, I'm going to say pressure, but that's not the right word.
Resistance?
Yes, you have to constantly increase the resistance. If you keep picking up those 8-pound weights, your body adapts to them and they're no longer heavy. So if you want to increase your strength, increase your muscle mass, whatever, you have to pick up a heavier weight and it's going to feel heavier. But that's the only way you're going to ever improve.
Right. And that, I think that feeling heavier is what scares people, right? Like they're afraid, okay, well, this means I can't do it. And the mindset shift that I'm still struggling with, I'm not saying that I'm an expert on it by any means. The mindset shift has to be, well, if I do this more often, it'll get easier.
Yes.
And that's currently what I've been dealing with, going from 25 to 30 on push press or push up. What is it? I forget what it is, but incline bench push things. Yeah, that.
Incline bench press.
Thank you.
It's a bench press, but the bench is on an incline.
Yes. But at first, when Josh told me to do 30s, I was like, no way, absolutely not. Like, get out of here. You're wrong. And the more that I've done it now, like by the end of this week, I was like, I can kind of do these now. Like, this is pretty cool. So it's about consistency. It's about persistence. And those two things I feel like are really helpful when you're on the blue floor. And the coaches help us feel that way.
Yeah. And I think what I think is interesting is like consistency and persistence. Did you learn anything about those while you were dealing with your grief and recovery?
Oh, I'm still dealing with it.
Well,
persistence.
Obviously.
Yeah. Persistence.
I don't expect you. You're not over your mother in 5 years.
Yeah, no.
What the hell? Like,
according to this, I should be on the myths, the
right?
myths of grief. Yeah. Oh yeah. So I think persistence for sure. Particularly because there were plenty of times and in random parts of immediately after that it felt like it was never going to be okay. And that's heavy, right? It's like a heavy weight. You feel it. But working out and being with my sister and talking to therapists, like that helped give me hope. And I think that's what everyone, like from a human nature, is after. They want hope that it's going to get better. And I think that in itself breeds the mindset of consistency and persistence, because you know that if you keep trying, you'll get there.
So it was very heavy.
Yeah.
You didn't think you could carry it.
Yeah.
But through consistency and persistence.
Yeah, it's almost like I just walked myself into that.
I was just like, as you were talking about the weights, I was like, oh, this actually, like,
it's very similar, isn't it? Yeah. And I I think that a lot of times in a gym setting, you feel like you have to know everything in order to succeed. And I have not known anything, but have asked and have been involved and engaged. And I think that's what makes all the difference is the coaches are willing to help you, but you have to tell them if you have questions or if you need something or if, whatever
So
sentence is.
I would spin this back again to when we talk about grief. Did you get over that all alone?
No, God, no. And it's still, no, absolutely.
I mean, I keep saying that like you're over it, and
no, you're fine.
I'm not
know
meaning no, you're over it. I'm just like
I know what you mean.
From the heavy to the lighter.
Yeah,
you get help along that journey, right?
Support, community, and that's to your point. Back to the beginning of this conversation when we were talking about, did you come in thinking you wanted that community? No, It's just a happy accident. And it's one of the best accidents because, there are people that I've made connections with that I never would have. And I feel like I've got a community behind me here that I didn't have. And what I also love about it is that we're not the same age. And I think that is sometimes interesting because, as a younger individual, I was always nervous that the older crowd or the older than me crowd would think that I'm this young, annoying child lifting weights. But in reality, everyone's been really welcoming and wonderful. And I've got a good group of Power Hour friends that we all support each other and have a group message when we need each other on things. And it's a great sense of belonging.
I think I remember a time when you were trying to come to 5:30 a.m.s and you were struggling, and I was like, well, let me match you up with a buddy.
Yes.
And you were like, oh, I'm pretty sure they think I'm annoying.
I was, and God love Kathy. So Kathy, hello. She was great, and we actually found out that we had a lot in common because we both went to Akron and we both went into the same sorority. So it was like, oh my God, like I had no idea, but it was really helpful when I was still doing 5:30s. Now I don't catch me at a 5:30. I'll be a grumpy monster.
Well, now it's at 5:15, so you'll be even grumpier. But yeah, that's one thing that it always is interesting to me is people make so many friends here. Yeah. They don't think that that's part of like what they need, but like, especially like, people like stay-at-home moms, they won't realize it's like, oh, adults, I get to talk to adults now. So it is a really interesting, like different benefits outside of physical that you get here. And the other thing so we were talking about the myths of grief, right? And one of them is grieve alone. Yeah. And so that's what I think, the same thing I think comes on in here. People think that they should be able to do it alone. And I think it's very interesting because as Josh will say, you don't perform your own surgeries. Right. You don't perform your own dental procedures. You don't perform your own cleanings. But when it comes to like health and fitness, people will think, oh, I should be able to do this alone. And my guess is because there are people you see like some people can just eat food and not gain weight and just natural, they have like the natural instincts or whatever that work in their favor. Or guys at the gym go and they work out by themselves, So everyone sometimes thinks like I should be able to do this alone. Yeah. I think they feel that way with grief too. It's like, oh,
it's isolating.
Yeah, I should be able to do this alone, or I need to do this alone so I'm not bothering anyone. Right. You would bother me
all the time.
And I don't mean that I was bothered.
I know what you mean.
You were constantly like, help me with this, help me with this, help me with this. Yeah. And a lot of people would stay internal. Yeah. You might see somebody out there and they're like, I really want some help. It sure would be nice if somebody would tell me what to do. But they never ask. Yeah. And I think like, I don't know why grief and working out are so similar, Hannah.
Well, because they are, at least in the context of this conversation, because some people might look at working out as like the endorphin release they need, whereas I look at it as a way to lighten the burden that is always in my brain.
The burden. Yeah. I'm sorry your brain's a burden.
It is.
I like your brain, though.
It's a good brain. It's just struggling sometimes, and that's okay.
But anyway, yeah, I just like... I think it's important because, like, so the grieving is emotional. We might think of this as physical, but if you're struggling mentally or emotionally or having anxiety about the lifts or lack of confidence or whatever, it's no longer just physical. Right. And that's why it's important to have the people around you.
A support system. Yes. Yeah. And I think that you can find that in the members. I think you can find that in the coaches. And then it also is external, right? You've got to have a good a good guidepost behind you at home too. And if you don't, that's hard. And this is a place where you can maybe find that person that can be that for you when you need it. And I think a lot of times it's coming out of a pandemic, everyone's kind of socially awkward, right? None of us know how to like have conversations. And I think that I was thinking about when you were talking.
If you get too close to me, I will back up.
Right.
Like, close talkers that come up to me and I'm like, hey, I like 6 feet away.
This was kind of nice, like not having to deal with it. But sometimes on days that I work from home, the people at this gym are the only ones I talk to that are other adults, like outside of the people that I live with. So it's kind of nice to have that connection.
Okay. So I feel like I'm going all over the place.
No, it's okay.
Which is normal conversation, I think.
Yeah.
You say something and it gets me excited, and I say something and it gets you excited, and suddenly it's like, my notes. Who needs notes?
Yeah, right. I have not even looked at these.
But we've talked about some of these myths, and those are things that, people used to think this is how we heal. And I want to talk to you. You've mentioned it a little bit, but like, how did you really heal? Or how do you really heal? Again, mentioning that this is a
ongoing process. Yeah. And that's one of the things I liked about that grief workshop was kind of dispelling the fact that like there is no time limit on grief. And again, it doesn't matter if it's not like losing a parent. That's of course a very unique perspective, just like losing a child would be, just like losing a pet even is. So everyone has their own lane and we're all kind of struggling together. But the ongoing process for me has been a kind of a combination of things. To your point, a support system. So I've got obviously my sister who I love dearly. I've got Cole who I love dearly as well. And he's a great support system for me in times of need. And on top of that, here, which a lot of people, to your point, would probably say like, well, why is the gym that outlet for you? And like I said, for me, it's a place of quiet. It's a place of meditation almost. Like I'm not great at putting myself in a quiet space. I'm constantly thinking. And so mainly here, I'm just focused on breathing because I don't want to pass out. So it's that movement is a helpful aid in the whole overall picture. So it's more of a holistic approach to what I'm doing. And nutrition is important too. So we've kind of ignored that part of this conversation.
Well, nutrition's tough. It's very cyclical in that like bad nutrition will lead to you feeling like crap.
Yeah.
Feeling like crap will also lead to bad nutrition.
Yeah.
So at some point,
cycle.
You have to figure out how to remove yourself from that cycle. And sometimes it requires what Josh will call white knuckling it.
Yeah.
And like living through the discomfort to get away from the bad food, right?
Yeah.
We don't call it bad, but
not as great for you.
And that's why one thing that he'll say, and I don't know if you've ever heard this or if you would remember, because it's probably been a long time since your first strategy session. When people are new and they ask what they can do, Josh will usually tell them to add things.
Yeah.
When people try to diet, it's always like, I'm going to take this away and I'm going to take this away. And I'm not going to eat this or this or this or this. And then the week later, they're like, where's all that stuff? I miss it and I will need it back.
Yeah.
But he'll talk about adding. So you add protein. You add vegetables. Because those things can help you start getting out of the feel like crap.
Yeah.
Even if you're still eating some things
that aren't great for you.
That don't serve you as well.
Yeah.
You start getting the things that do serve you. You start to feel better. Sleep is huge. That's something else that I've been studying, and eventually I'm going to study it well enough to be able to talk about it more. But
and maybe sleep.
The amount of things that like sleep helps with.
Yeah.
It's unreal. So that's another way, like if you're not feeling good and you're like, I don't feel good, and then that leads me to not eating well. It's like, okay, so how much are you sleeping? Can you sleep more?
Yeah.
It can
be hard though. And that's, to your point earlier of connecting this back to grief, nutrition and sleep are probably two of the biggest things that get impacted. And once again, I'm going to disclaimer, grief is not, it can be whatever you're grieving is real and valid, and it doesn't have to be super traumatic. Like it can be what you're grieving. But it's easy after grief to not sleep because you're just kind of in a state of shock. That was hard for me. Nutrition, it can be really easy to want to get food that is comfort food, but it wasn't serving me in the way that I needed it to feel energized, to feel not sluggish, to feel motivated and build muscle. those are two things that were hard at first. Sleep is still sometimes hard.
And typically the food that you're going to be around in that situation is
like pasta and mac and cheese and, like just crazy amounts of really high, rich, like dairy product and not a lot of protein.
Yeah, I know when Josh's father passed, he was like, can someone bring me a freaking chicken?
Yeah. And everyone means well, right? They want to give you food, and it was great. But, I remember I think we had maybe 5 casseroles for, several weeks of people just bringing casseroles. And casseroles in nature are not the best for you.
Right? It's like pasta and cheese.
A piece of cream, a block of cream cheese always, somewhere in there.
Tastes good.
Yeah, great in, moderation, but not so much when you're grieving and it's easy to get into a cycle of not stopping. But...
So, and this is going to sound so weird, but...
There's no weird questions here.
We're talking about weird things. Yet.
Well, lay it on me.
So, what have you learned that would make grieving easier? Does it get easier? Is that a fair question to ask? Now that you know coping mechanisms, I'm not saying it's easy, but, you have coping mechanisms now.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that when your mom passed, you didn't have as much in place.
No. That's a good question. I don't think it's what worked for me won't work for everybody, right?
Sure.
And you've got to find the lanes that you feel best suited in. But for me, knowing that it's okay to lean on others was huge, because to your point, it can be very isolating when you're going through it and you feel like you can't talk about it, because no one wants to talk about death. No one wants to grapple with mortality. I don't either, personally. But
I took a class on it in college.
Yeah, I bet that was really uncomfortable.
Psychology of death and dying.
That sounds terrible. Oh my gosh.
Well, one thing about it that was really interesting was there was a girl in that class who I didn't know. She brought it up one day. My freshman year, there was a car accident. 4 freshmen went home for the weekend or were driving back to campus too fast. One person survived.
Oh God, so that was her,
and she was in my psychology of death and dying class.
God bless that woman.
Well, we were talking about there are certain situations, and you might even see this in TV shows. Somebody's in a bad accident and everyone else dies, and they wake up, and the doctors will be like, "Should we tell them?" There are studies that show a lot of times you might kill someone if they're not a very resilient person. You might literally kill them by telling them all your friends are dead because they give up the will to keep fighting.
Yeah.
And this was the discussion that day, and she raised her hand
and probably mic dropped everyone.
Well, yeah, she was like, "Well, I'll tell you."
From my experience,
because we were all discussing hypotheticals, and she's like, "Well, I'll tell you how it really worked for me." Because, not a hypothetical.
That's brave.
Because she was in the ICU, and they did lie to her and tell her that everyone was fine, and until she was healthy.
Yeah.
And she's like, there's some anger to it, but it's also I don't know if I could have dealt with it.
Yeah. It's hard. I can't imagine. My God, but that woman is brave.
Yeah.
She deserves a medal, at some point in her life for having to go through that. That's awful.
But I think that class was one of the ways that she was trying to help
deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably knowing the why, right?
Right.
In fact, she's part of that unique group of people that wants to know, well, why am I the way that I am?
And that didn't get me completely off my train of thought or anything. She's like, "Oh,
no, that's an interesting story." Yeah, it's awful to think about, but
yeah,
it impacts people in different ways and can make them, to your point, not try anymore. And that's I think cycle people have to sometimes push themselves out of, and it's not easy.
Yeah,
it's an uphill battle.
So one thing that I definitely want to bring up, and I know you said that you're not an expert, but I do want you to explain what you talked about with the somatic interventions that you can use to reprocess trauma and grief, and how movement at the gym is that. Because this is new. This is a new thing for me, and I want to learn about it.
It's a fun one. I didn't know about it until my great therapist currently walked me through it. So somatic interventions, allegedly there's 10 of them. Again, I'm not an expert. I've just have a worksheet that I was given. And there's various forms of it. A lot of it is the concept of, it's really the idea of the connection between your mind and your body, and how if you've experienced trauma, if you've experienced loss, it sometimes can be very woven and connected. And so movement is one of the interventions that they recommend trying. And for me, because of having a workout regimen, and, for the first 2 years after my mom died, I didn't really deal with it. I'll be honest. I kind of was like just surviving, and, up until recently have learned that I was secretly doing this without even realizing it, which is movement. And so it's a little bit more of the concept of do what your body is telling you to do. So in some cases, and this is an example, if you feel like you want to hide, go under the covers and hide. It's like allowing your body to act out what it wants to do from like a very limbic system, lizard brain concept. And the gym for me was getting out anger, because that's a big part of grief. And so being able to sweat and have endorphins, and like, I don't like crying. No one does. But for me, being able to have that outlet of lifting up a heavy weight and slamming those ropes some days, that was huge.
Rope
and
slams,
I didn't,
ball slams.
Right.
Like,
lots of things to take out and pretend are the universe and, screaming into the wind as you're doing it. But that was something that has been really helpful. And now I've been able to implement it more, where if I'm upset for whatever reason and I know that I need to get up and move, I get up and move. And it's a great way to kind of remind your body that you're in the here and now, and you're not in an unsafe place, and it's okay what you're doing. If you're moving, you're okay. So that's.
My therapist gets really proud of me when I listen to my body.
Right.
I'll be like, I took a nap. And I'm like, I had 8 million things to do. And she's like, but your body needed a nap? Yes. And you gave your body what it needed? Yes. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, no, it's hard. Because we also live in a society where everyone says you have to be going 24 miles an hour. And not 24, 90 miles an hour. That's probably better.
24 hours a day. Yeah.
24 hours a day. Yes, you got my point.
No breaks.
Right, none. And if you do, you're lazy. And that's not
And
true
if you're listening
at all.
to this podcast, you better be working while you're listening to it, because heaven forbid you take a break and just enjoy something.
Yeah, heaven forbid you listen to me and Shauna ramble for however long we've been rambling for. But that finding time in the busyness is also hard too, because when you're grieving, you feel like you have a million things to do, and taking time for yourself feels selfish.
You're not selfish. And this is one thing, especially with moms.
Yeah.
And like, you're not a mom right now. But you're a mom to your debate kids.
Sometimes.
You have your debate kids. So you have other people that you're taking care of.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing when you say like self-care feels selfish. We get that with mothers all the time.
Yeah.
It's so hard for them to take care of themselves. They're like, oh, I have to be here for my kid. I have to do this for my kid. And then if they stay here for a while and like consistently work out and get stronger, then they're like, oh my God, I'm more awake for my kid. I can do this thing for my kid that I couldn't do before.
It's kind of like the airplane, like you got to put your mask on first.
It is.
It's a really hard concept. And again, to your point, not a mom, so moms don't come for me. I imagine it would be difficult to feel like you can sacrifice the time for yourself when you feel obligated to make everything okay and special for your other human that you're responsible for.
And some people have really cool kids.
Yeah.
That are like, no, mom, go do that for you.
Yeah.
And some people, this is funny, I think Coach Carrie, she's like, I get cranky when I don't work out. So my husband and kids will literally be like, go work out.
Yeah, go take out some rage.
Yeah. So, and we've had other members say that too. And I think that really helps, because then they're like, oh, I'm doing this
I'm
thing.
better when I do this. Yeah.
I'm better when I do this. I'm my best mother when I do this.
Yeah. And with the workouts, boot camp, it's quick. It's not like you're in here. You don't have to be in here for 2 hours. You don't have to take, it's 45, 50 minutes max.
You can also scare your children into submission easier when you show them the pictures of the dumbbells and stuff that you can
And maybe
lift.
you can hoist them and get them out of a situation that they're being difficult in,
Well, people will talk about it. We have one member and she's got a 4-year-old and she's like, I do power hour and I'm lifting these heavy dumbbells, and I go home and I can still lift my 4-year-old. And a lot of people, when a kid starts getting to 4, 5, 6 years
You
old,
can't. Yeah.
they start getting heavier than you can pick up, or at least hold or carry around for very long. So that's another way that it makes her a better mom.
Yeah.
Coach Matt, he's 66. He went to a family gathering. He's the only grandparent that can get on the floor and play with the kids.
Wow.
So like we do those get back up sometimes in mobility.
They're
and
practical.
Everybody complains about them. But when you all of a sudden are like, oh, I can get down and play with the kids and get back up, and nobody else here can.
Right.
You're like, oh.
Badge of honor.
Yeah. I've had a couple people who've had recent injuries who've been like, oh, you wouldn't believe how helpful those get back ups are. And I'm like, I would.
Yeah.
I would believe.
All of it. I mean, they're there for a reason. The mobility I love because it is so practical and you can use it in everyday life and you don't realize it until you're in that situation for the most part.
It is designed to help your body move better.
Yeah.
Which means you don't hurt yourself as much.
Yeah.
So yes, it is good for all areas of life, because all areas of life, if your body's not moving well, you can hurt yourself.
Yeah, just like sitting at a computer all day. We love that shoulder pain.
One thing that you had added after you had watched Sabrina's workshop, that goes in with the anxiety more than the grief, was the concept of reacting versus responding.
Yeah.
And how you use how the gym helps you.
Yeah.
To help you like be able to deal
yeah.
and like have positive responses, because that's one thing that she talked about was like taking ownership, right? It's like you cannot control the loss that you've had, you cannot control what has happened, and I always have a caveat on this, which is like you are 100% responsible for your feelings and emotions. I never feel responsible for that first initial like thing that happens. I don't feel responsible for that. It happens so fast and like
right, but that's because you're reacting, right? Like that's the whole point is react versus respond. It's a tricky balance, but I see this more happen where it's anger related more than it's anxiety related. Of if I feel wronged or if I feel frustrated, if I don't have an outlet of movement, if I'm not able to get into the gym, I will react more than I respond. And by that I mean I might say something I don't mean. I might make it a bigger deal than it is. I might overanalyze it. But if I have a chance, and this happens where I'll sign off at 5 at work, I'll be frustrated for something that happened. I'll go to the gym in the morning, and then I'm happy and fine because I've been able to get those endorphins out. And that's how it's played a role for me, is it's allowed me to have an outlet that isn't going to hurt or harm anyone. Mm-hmm. And that's important, right? Like we need to, have that moment and then think about it. And the quiet, believe it or not, slows down the war and the gymnastics happening and allows me to make better decisions because I have a clear head and a clear mind.
You know what's funny? Because you talk about the quiet. It's so loud in here during a workout.
But you know what's funny? I don't hear anything.
I know. Sometimes people will complain about the music and I'll be like, literally, unless it was a like shoop and I started singing along to it, I don't
remember. Yeah. It's kind of like I joked to Cole, I'm like, I black out for the hour that we're in here. Like, I don't know what, like if I said something, if I did something, I have no clue. Like I just lifted the weights and got my stuff done.
Please don't talk to me when I'm working out. You're just getting a blank stare. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's Cole and I both. Like one of us will try to talk to the other and we're like, wait, what? Like what's going on?
But so when you talk about how that helps you be able to respond instead of react, like we talking about like the consistency here, or is it like I'm so angry I better go work out so that I cannot be like rude to people?
Both, so, like, a little bit, like because I think the consistency helps me practice that all the time. Like it's not a quick fix, but like having the consistent schedule of coming in and working out and getting those endorphins, like that helps me balance out some of the chaos and crazy. But there are times for sure where like a specific session, like in the gym on the blue floor, will help if it's something that's really bothering me. And, it also helps because as someone who has anxiety, it sometimes can be hard to fall asleep at night. Mm-hmm. Because you think about all the things you did, especially like from 3rd grade, because those are important at 12 o'clock at night. But going to the gym, like, it's almost like I'm wearing out my body so that I can't even fight that battle anymore. Like, I'm going to get up before I have any time to think about it, go work out. Okay, you're tired now. Don't worry about the rest of stuff that you can't control. So it's a little bit of both.
Because one thing you mentioned was, like, being frustrated when you get out of work at 5. And then you're like, I work out in the morning. Please tell me that you're not frustrated and stressed out until you work out again.
No, there's some solace in knowing that I'm going to have the outlet the next day. Okay. Of like, you know what? Well, I'll push through this in the morning and I will feel better after I work out. Like, I'm not sitting there like stewing, just like rage inducing after 5.
As opposed to, like, if you didn't have that consistently, you might get frustrated of like, I don't know how am I going to like
deal with this?
Yeah. How am I going to deal with this? So, like, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow and I'm going to take this out on some ropes and I'm going to feel better.
Hoping there's some burpees, just to like aggressively jump at the floor.
So can we talk about your physical progress?
Sure.
This is one thing. I mean, one of the things about this podcast, obviously, is I want to stress that there are more results than just weight loss. And that there are a lot of things here. And we've covered that. But you did
covered a lot of mental.
We've covered a lot of mental, which are things that people don't normally think about.
Yeah.
But you do still have, like, other goals and things that got you to the gym and keep you going, right?
Yeah. So when I first started at the gym, I think a lot of what I was looking for was weight loss, because after a year of not being able to work out, I thought that I was not in a great place shape-wise. So I was really focused on the number on the scale. That was, like, number one. In the last couple of years of being here, I care less about that. I mean, I still worry about it. And we were talking just recently that I've been having some body image issues mentally. But for me now...
Well, I still think your doctor sucks for telling you you were overweight at your size.
Yes.
I think it's ridiculous and an unnecessary pressure to put on your head, especially since you already have anxiety. Like,
oh, yeah, that's definitely did not help the problem of getting told that. Regardless of that, though... Power Hour has shifted that. And that's only been, I haven't even been in Power Hour a year, I don't think. No. For me now, I jokingly have told you and I've told Josh, I want don't mess with me arms. That is my goal right now, is don't mess with me arms. I want the teenagers that I work with to fear me solely because of my strength. Like, that is my goal at the moment. Not really. But that is more, I think, a different approach at what I want from the gym. Not only weight loss, I actually want strength.
Everybody wants don't mess with me arms.
Yeah.
It's really, like, this is completely off topic, but it's kind of frustrating as a woman because men's muscles show so much easier.
Yeah, Cole's been here for 3 months and he's got like a beefcake arm. Like, he's looking great. And I feel like I've been here 5 years and I still have little puny arms. So then
you have to deal with, like, men who think you can't lift stuff.
Yeah.
Although it's often fun to show them you can.
Yes.
We had another member, and she's in her 50s and very unassuming looking. She's not ripped or anything, but she went with some friends that she hadn't seen in a while, and they were like, holy crap, look at all the things you can do.
Yeah.
Because, like, faster, stronger. Yeah. So it is really cool. And it does suck as a woman that it's harder to show. It's harder for people to just look at you and be like, damn, you must be strong.
Right.
Unless you're showing them the picture of you lifting stuff.
Right, unless all the boot camp pictures or Power Hour pictures.
Instead of, you don't have kids, so just fill your wallet up with pictures of you lifting heavy things.
Yeah, I'll do that for sure. I'll put them up in my office. Everyone can see it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's an interesting thing, and I'm, like, happy that takes the pressure off you of the scale, because you can't make the scale do things.
No. Well, and it's in the kitchen, right? Like, and that's a concept that I learned here of, you can do so much cardio, you can do so much weightlifting, but if you're not eating what you need to, you're not going to see anything change. And it's a really hard thing. And I struggle with nutrition is like number one enemy for me, because it's very easy to just go into patterns and go into cycles, especially with grief, and then be mad at myself because I'm like, man, I'm not helping make that progress for myself. But it's really up to me, right? I have all the support I need here. It's up to me at home to put that into action, and that's hard.
And I think it's also harder for someone with anxiety, because sometimes I know you've asked me questions and I'm like, this is so far above what you need to be worrying about.
Yeah.
Like, go get some protein and some veggies and stop worrying about this tiny little thing that you found that might be
detrimental. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I it's interesting. We just had someone in the group, the Facebook group that we're in from a member standpoint, and talk about how logging their food has caused pain and hardship. And I struggle with that too. Like if I'm hyper focused on what I'm eating, then I'm super worried about the numbers and like the math. And we've had conversations about this, and you've told me, don't worry about what the number is, just log the entity, the item, the tangible thing, and see where you land. And that's hard.
It is, and this is like, obviously the main topic of this was like grief or whatever, and this is where what I was trying to get to earlier of where I think it comes down is like people are like, oh, I just can't eat right, or like the very popular, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. Mm-hmm. And these other aspects of like your grief or your anxiety are impacting your ability to eat these foods. So then it's like you might then feel bad about yourself, or feel shame or extra anxiety, and that actually helps you eat more bad foods.
Yeah. Well, you're in your own way. Yes. And I do think there's something to be said for in those moments, like you're doing the best you can, and you deserve a little bit more grace than you're probably giving yourself. And I probably do too. But that's why I have you to remind me.
No, and I think everyone deserves more grace, because like I would say, like, if you want to lose weight, go for walks every day, work out. I said the same thing to MJ last week. Go for walks every day, work out 3 or 4 times a week, and eat protein at every meal. Yeah. And that is so simple.
Yet so hard. Yeah.
And sometimes, like for me, it's a physical issue. For someone else, it might be a mental issue.
Yeah.
If you're struggling with depression, for instance,
it's going to be hard to get out of bed.
Being active is a great way to improve things. But it's also almost impossible to do.
Yeah, it's like the worst option possible presented to you.
It's like, hey, this thing that you feel like you absolutely can't do
will actually help you.
It's the thing that's going to help make you better. And it's like, well, come on, are you serious? But anyway, that's where I feel like people just beat themselves up so much. And that's part of why I wanted to bring you on and have this podcast with you, is to help show, like, there's so many different things that go on in your life. There's so many things that you have to take care of. And they're all interrelated.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm trying to help people with, is like, if you have this interrelated thing and you're not taking care of it, that might be why
you're not getting the results you want on the floor.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's the connection there is strong, and I think people don't want to your point earlier, burden anyone, and they feel like it's, what I said, selfish to take care of yourself, and it's not. And these conversations are helpful because it shows that if someone else is feeling the way that I've been feeling, or any of the thoughts and feelings that we've shared today, you're not alone.
Right.
And we're here to help.
And these are, to your point, these are the burdens that people don't want to share.
Yeah.
They might ask me about vegetables or protein, but this is the kind of stuff they keep to themselves.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, hey, like, I'm miserable every day. Like, how do
I make this work for me in the current state that I'm in?
Yes. Yeah. And like, people get busy all the time. And I talked to one member, and she's like, well, what'll happen is I miss Monday, and then I miss Tuesday, and then I miss Thursday. She wasn't planning to come Wednesday, right? So she's like, and then it's Friday, and I feel like, oh, I'm only going to be able to get 1 or 2 in this week, even if I start today. So then I just don't come at all. And I'm like, where did we all get this idea that none is better than one?
Yeah.
We all are so much with the all or nothing. And I'm always, because people have, like, the caregivers, I can't get to the gym because I'm taking care of so-and-so. Can you get to the gym once?
Can you go on a walk for 5 minutes? Can you, X, Y, and Z?
We have someone boot camp right now who's a caregiver and got their spouse to take over last Saturday so she could come get this in and get a little bit of self-care. So it's like we have the all or nothing, and sometimes that really trips people up when these other things are getting in the way.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, I'm too depressed. Can you get here once? That's what anyone who's been struggling to get in, I'm like, can you get here once?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. I just recently worked with a nutrition coach, and it was like, can you eat protein? Are you eating protein with all your meat? Well, I thought I was. but I'm really not eating protein at lunch at all. And it's like,
okay, how do you do that then moving
Yeah.
forward? How do you get that involved?
so it's like,
Yeah.
it's one thing. We're going to try and change
But that one thing can feel very hard.
Yeah. But that's why, like, the all or nothing, right? It's like, people are like, oh, I can only do one thing. I might as well not do it.
Yeah. One's better than none.
Yeah.
That's the mentality everyone should try to adopt.
And if you go to the other extreme of, like, I'm going to do this and this and this, and it's not easy, and then it's like you fall back anyway. So always encouraging people to do one thing.
Yeah. Gotta walk, isn't it walk before you can run, crawl before you can walk?
Yeah. We talk, it's so funny because people laugh at me. This was in a book that Josh and I read, but talks about baby steps. Or when a baby first is learning to walk, they fall down. But
Imagine if they didn't get up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's the same thing on the gym floor. It's the same thing with nutrition. You're just babies falling over and you have to get back up.
I love that idea of we're just all little toddlers running around.
We're all little toddlers learning to run still.
No one knows what's going on. It's fine.
And I know this as a 40-year-old business owner. No one is actually a grown-up.
No, we're all just faking it until we make it, I swear.
Like, I work with people who are like 10 or 20 years older than me, and they're still like, no, you're the adult I'm going to. And I'm like, why am I the adult you're going to?
Why am I the adult to your adult?
If you're in your 50s, shouldn't you be the adult? Shouldn't I be going to you? Crap.
We're like, this is not good.
Yeah. I ask my mom this every few years. I'm like, you feel like an adult yet?
Really, what's her
Are
answer?
you still faking it? She's like, no.
Doesn't feel like an adult.
So fun fact, when I was 13, my dad told me to grow up, and I said, you first.
Oh, I love it. I love the sass.
That went really well
I'm
for me.
sure 13-year-old Shauna had a great conversation with mom after that.
Yeah. Well, we're still waiting on Dad to grow up. He doesn't know how to find this on the internet, so I can say that.
We all are. We all are.
We're still waiting on Dad to grow up, on Mom to grow up, on our brothers and sisters to grow up, on ourselves to grow up.
Yeah. Let me know when you get there, because I don't know if it ever will happen for me.
But I think that's part of the giving yourself grace.
Yeah.
It's there's no point where you magically know everything. So you have to learn how to move through the world.
Of not being alone.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be if you don't want to.
And that's really funny, actually, in terms of the business, because I never would have done this on my own.
Yeah.
Like, I would be too scared of screwing things up, whereas Josh was just like, oh, you want to make a mistake? Go make it and see what happens. Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to do this even though it might be a mistake? Yep. Okay. He said I can, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's beauty in failing. It allows you to learn and move forward, and that's kind of nice.
Still working on that one.
It's hard.
It's hard.
All of what we've talked about today has been
hard. And that's, that's something MJ and I talked about last week, was like simple and easy or different things.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things we've talked about are technically easy, but
they're not simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're a little bit
more
technically
complex. Simple, but they're not easy. They're
Yeah.
hard. It's hard. It's hard to get over emotional and mental things. It's hard to speak up and ask for help. It's hard to reach out.
It's hard to show up sometimes.
Yeah.
But we do it.
Right. Because you get nothing from not participating, right?
Better to try than wonder why.
I like that one.
There you go.
Better to try than wonder why. All right. I think I'm going to wrap this up.
Okay.
And then try to edit it so we sound cool.
Okay.
I think we sound pretty good.
I think we sound great.
I think we sound pretty great anyway. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for discussing some things that are kind of uncomfortable. And I hope that it helps, like, somebody who may have been listening be like, hey, I have this uncomfortable thing that's holding me back or that I'm struggling to deal with. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to find someone. I'm going to start working on this thing for me.
Yeah. That's the goal. And if anyone needs that support and cheerleader, we're here. I'm here. I'm sure there's other people that have experienced what I've experienced, and it's actually kind of nice to know other people have them. It's good to have that connection and similarity. So happy to be a support to anyone needed.
All right, thank you, Hannah. I still haven't figured out how to close things down properly.
We're just gonna say thanks, everybody, and we'll see you on the blue floor.
Thanks, everybody. Oh yeah, like and subscribe if that's the thing where you're watching this.